Hey, everybody, this is Uncle Mike, and this is Ross Ben, and we are back with episode number 6 of From the 40th Parallel. And this is going to be a very exciting one because we're going to talk about a day where we bridged the internet gap. Whereas this relationship has always been experienced from a distance, I made a travel to the mystical and fantastical realm of the Wissahickon Creek, and we're here to share some wild stories. So without any further ado, Razaben, how are you, my friend?
Thankful. How you making it?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm still trying to process everything which we
Yeah,
went through, but yeah,
I'm
yeah.
processing as well, bruh. Yeah, that was yo, I see when you go to the Wissahickon with a group, like a group of high frequency people, yo, you open up portals, man, cause that day was very profound. Just, the things that, we experienced, and we definitely gonna talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I had never experienced in my 20 something years of hitting that scene. But then even afterwards, man, it's like I just felt this charge ever since. Ever
Yeah.
since I just got this charge, and a lot of things have been opening up, a lot of opportunities, and yeah, man, it was just a magical day. I was thankful.
Well, I mean, just to give a little context to the people who are listening at home. So Roz had put together, Roz and an organization known as Wissahickon Wellness had put together a tour of the Wissahickon Creek. And about 25 of us were in attendance. And what is so fascinating, like it would be one thing, like if all 25 of us like went to a tour of an interesting place, but our tour guide had 20 years of experience of like really understanding the subtleties of this area. And so the reason why that's important is all of us, the other 24 of us, we don't have a point of reference. So we're like, wow, that was really something. But Roz has the ability and is going to illustrate for us that there was something special, and I think we're planning on doing some more. So anyone who is listening to this and is capable of making any future tour events, like this is bigger than just the description of walking in the woods.
Definitely. It's definitely more than a walk in the woods. And like what I had shared with the group setting off, Philly's known for its center city attractions and Ben Franklin Parkway, Art Museum, Franklin Institute, Logan Circle, City Hall, Independence Hall, all those are powerful spots. But in my humble opinion, as it was described to us by someone we just ran into that day, if you really want to experience the spiritual history of Philadelphia, as far as this one walking tour, and I know I did right because I make it so often, it's like kind of an average walk to me, but I did see, like, by the end of the day, some of the group was a little fatigued. But with even considering that, just to be able to do one walk and experience so much history, I think that was what the tour in the lower Wissahickon, from Rittenhouse Township, the remnants of it, to the Monastery stables that has the I Am Temple, and we will talk about that, over to the Hermit's Cave, Johann Kelp, the first Rosicrucian, his cave, and Lover's Leap. Yeah, man, that the whole, really the spiritual birth of the nation,
Why don't you just why don't you roll with this? Why don't you start off our conversation, and I'll sit back and
Sure. So can I share? Let me share screen. Yeah, let me share screen. And
do you have the ability? Oh, here we go.
Yes, we're good.
All right, good.
All right, so our trip kind of centered around this character right here. A man named Comte, which means count in French. Comte de Saint Germain, or Count Saint Germain, you know? And this guy is kind of looked at by, let me see if I can find, the adherents of the I Am Temple, right? One of which is in the Wissahickon, right? This is the one we went to that day. And I Am Temple was founded in 1930 by a guy named Guy Ballard, who actually claims to be a reincarnation of George Washington, right? And he basically set up this, what some label a cult, that worships this ascended master named Count Saint Germain. And I always knew there was something deep about this place, man. Just, if anything else, just the vibe around it, you know? And I did do research on the I Am Temple, you know, trying to like really figure out who they were and how they fit in to the Great Mystery Philadelphia, you know? Because where this I Am Temple is, at what's called the Monastery Stables in the Wissahickon, it's such a mystical power vortex scene, and this place holds a, a, a high recognition in Lenape tradition. It's supposedly the field where naming ceremonies were conducted on the equinox, the vernal equinox. From the tradition that I heard, the Lenape would not, like, let's say a youth was born, you know, any other time before the equinox, they wouldn't receive a name until the equinox, and that they would gather at this field and there receive their name. And I think this is all tied into the fact that the Lenape are called the grandfathers of humanity, you know, the elders of humanity, right? And the Wissahickon, this is some ancient land. This is land hundreds of millions of years older than Appalachia. And I'm not going to get all into the geology of it right now, but it's just ancient land. And so it would follow that the elders of humanity would settle on this ancient land, you know? And so where these monastery stables are, this is supposedly where the naming ceremonies, and I would imagine other significant ceremonies as well, would occur, you know? So this I Am Temple is right there. And I always knew something was up, but I couldn't figure it out. And particularly with this guy, Saint Germain, it just wasn't adding up, you know? But I was able to penetrate it. I was able to figure it out when I was actually doing research on New Orleans in the 1800s. And there was this account of a vampire, an immortal vampire named Jacques Saint Germain, right? And I will get into the details to it a little later on, but the point is, once I saw that there was a vampire named Jacques Saint Germain, and I thought to myself, wow, what if we looked at the character associated with the I Am temple, Comte Saint Germain, not so much as this ascended master that, you know, incarnates in different people throughout history, like has incarnated in different embodiments throughout history. But what if we look at him as an immortal vampire that just shifts up his identity every couple of hundred years, you know? Then everything about, once I like had that subtle shift of perspective, everything about Saint Germain, the I Am Temple, and his connection to a specific historical event that occurred in the Wissahickon, known as the Consecration of George Washington, right? Everything fell into place, you know? So this guy, I kind of mentioned this, that whole Saint Germain movement, right? It's headquartered out of Illinois, right? They have facilities in Dunsmuir, California, and Denver, Colorado. Now, what's interesting is they don't publicly speak about the I Am Temple in the Wissahickon, okay? At least not on their website. So again, it was founded by this guy named Guy Ballard in 1930. He claims to be a reincarnation of George Washington, and he says that Saint Germain is like this ascended master, you know? And as an ascended master, Saint Germain has had all of these different incarnations in which he is impacted the, you know, space-time historical trajectory of humanity. First incarnation as this ruler of a golden age 50,000 years ago, centered in the Sahara Desert. Then as a high priest of Atlantis 13,000 years ago. Then again as the prophet Samuel. And here's where he gets his name, Uncle Sam. And the prophet Samuel is important biblically because he was the last of the Hebrew judges before the kings, you know, particularly David and Solomon. And as such, it was the prophet Samuel who anointed the kings, right? They also say this guy was Saint Joseph, father of Jesus and, you know, husband of Mary. They say he was Saint Alban, the first British martyr, right? They say he was Merlin. And why is that important? Is because Merlin is the anointer of the Arthurian kings, okay? They say he was both Roger and Francis Bacon. And in my opinion, that would make him the embodiment of Prometheus, the giver of electric fire to humanity, because it was their scientific methods handed to Ben Franklin that you know, opened up modern electronical age, you know. Christopher Columbus, right? They don't have it listed here, but the tradition says he was also Christian Rosencruz. Okay, so you know, we break it down in the Great Mystery Philadelphia that Christian Rosencruz is semi-historical, semi-mythical, probably more mythical than historical. But again, if we look at the like story as it is accounted in the alchemical wedding of Christian Rosencruz, that this guy is an immortal vampire, because the alchemical wedding of Christian Rosencruz is all centered around beheading the Moor and throwing his body, throwing the Moor in the king's court of the Moor into a huge vat and boiling, like beheading them, draining their blood, putting that in one vat, and then taking his body and boiling it down into a, you know, liquid substance, blending the two together and serving it at the wedding of Virgo Luciferia. You know, that's the alchemical wedding of Christian Rosencruz, you know. And we do break, that's one thing we do in the Great Mystery Philadelphia, is break all that down. The allegory to historic unfoldment, you know. So then again, right, if we look at this dude as an immortal vampire, it makes total sense. It don't make full sense until you look at this guy from this lens, right? But particularly this character they call Comte Saint Germain, the Wonder Man of Europe. He's known by several names, okay? But he was supposedly, he'd come out of this Transylvanian nobility. So that does already kind of connect him to like the lineage of Vlad the Impaler and those blood gorging nobles of Transylvania, right? And again, to tie this into the Great Mystery Philadelphia, we speak about this significant event that occurred in the like early 1300s at a place called Hauska Castle, where basically a rituals occurred that opened the gates of hell, and that this event is ritualized and memorialized in two places on planet Earth: France and Philadelphia. And the Rodin Museum, that's what is really, it's a tribute to, right? But that this event spawned 13 bloodlines, one of which was seated in Transylvania. And we, you know, through heraldry, track this lineage. Well, here we have what appears to be an immortal vampire from this lineage coming here to the Wissahickon to anoint George Washington here in you know, right here in the Wissahickon on the site where that I Am temple and the monastery stables is today, you know. And he's done a lot of things. I'm not going to get all into what Count Saint Germain has done, other than to say it does seem that he played one other role in the founding of the nation. Do you want to give that account?
No, please go right ahead.
Okay, I'll do my best because I'm going on memory. So help fill in the blanks if I leave something significant out, okay?
Okay.
Manly Hall and the Secret Destiny of America. He recounts that there was this unnamed character at the signer of the Declaration of Independence that made this very stirring speech, charging, you know, those there to found the nation, you know? And it seems like this guy was more than likely Comte Saint Germain. Is there anything to add to that?
I'll add just a little bit of color commentary to it. So,
Please.
so how it's told in that story, like it's remarkable. So it says that you've got all of the original signers of, or at this point, the potential signers of the Declaration of Independence. At which point you're basically saying, like, I'm putting my name out there. I'm putting my name up until this moment, like I'm kind of in the shadows, but I'm putting my name out there, and it's like there's gonna, you know, I'm drawing the line in the sand. And there was a lot of arguments. They were like in the, well, I'm not certain what building they were in, but they had all of the shutters closed. They had guards at the door. No one could come in. This is top secret. And they're like, are we going to do it or are we not going to do it? And they were going back and forth and back and forth. And then, and this is all like accounted in Manly P. Hall's book. He says in great detail, and he says that there was a mysterious figure in the back of the room, and no one knew how he got there. Like all the doors are locked, all the windows are shut, and he made a speech. And he made, just as you were saying, the speech which incited something within all of the men who were in that room, and they didn't say another word. And they lined up and they signed their names, and then that was that. And when you put that story in concert, or in like a greater perspective with the consecration of George Washington, like what happened in that story, and then also like what you're saying with the history of the anointing of kings that have followed this Saint Germain story through, you know, the history which you just laid out, you know, there's this consistency that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And it's told from multiple perspectives.
Multiple perspectives, yes. So the one thing I will quote Voltaire. His one line about this Comte Saint Germain kind of says it all. He was a contemporary of this guy in French, you know, highbrow society. The Count de Saint Germain is a man who was never born, who will never die, and who knows everything. Okay? So before I get into the George Washington piece and the consecration, I do want to, let's go through this account of this dude named Jacques Saint Germain in New Orleans, because this is what made it all click for me, right? So this is, if I'm recalling correctly, we're now in the 1800s, okay? And let me see, yeah. All right, and then you have this cat appear in New Orleans named Jacques Saint Germain, right? And this dude is an alchemist, right? And what I mean by that, he was putting on these lavish parties because he could just transform a janky diamond, a janky blemished diamond into like a perfect gem. He could transmute lead to gold, right? So he was, you know, pouring wealth into the noble caste down in New Orleans, right? Throwing these lavish parties, just increasing the wealth abundantly. So of course he was very popular, right? He was putting on these elaborate feasts of which he would never eat, right? He would only drink this red concoction out of this goblet, okay? And like this, you know, he did this so frequently, it caught people's attention. You know what I mean? And one night, he invited uh, invited a prostitute over his house, and he attacked her, tried to bite her neck and suck her blood, right? Was about to kill her, and he got interrupted. Somebody like walked in on him, right? So the woman ran away, filed a police report, right? But because he was of like a aristocratic caste, right? When the police came, they were like, yeah, you know, you have this complaint against you. We're not gonna trouble you right now. Just report to the police station tomorrow and explain to us what happened between you and this woman, right? And he never showed up. So, you know, they went to his spot the next day. He was gone. He had broke out, right? But they found these bottles of wine, and when they checked it out, they had blood in them, you know? So this was the story of Jacques Saint Germain. And then that raises the natural question, is it Jacques Saint Germain or Count Saint Germain, this immortal? This is what I'm saying, like, it clicked who Count Saint Germain and the things that he did and how he was able to do it. It really clicked once I looked at him from a perspective of an immortal. Now, what even gives this more credibility is there's a cat in the 70s who claimed to be him, you know? And this, let me skip the ad.
Or the very first scene which we saw of this character right here, there's a chateau in the background, and like in a very general sense, like it's not I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but in a general sense, that's basically the house which the I Am Temple, you know, it looks like
Model
it's got
that.
that feel, like it's like
Yeah.
it's the same aesthetic in a way, it's the same modus operandi.
Yeah. I paused it here. Look, I benefit from a product which comes from a technique and a science that allows me to go through time. So if this dude is Jacques Saint Germain, what's that product and technique and science? Vampirism.
Look at his
Okay?
skin,
And let the people see, you know?
like it's got the
Because
feel.
you got the idea. You could go check out that whole, you see it's on YouTube. You could go and check the whole documentary yourself. Look at that.
And let me add this, like to paint the picture for the people at home. Like this Wissahickon Creek Park is a bit. It's not like Central Park. It's not a manicured park. It is an enormous park in pretty much its natural condition, with just like maybe some paved trails and a little bit of touches. There is like a golf course, but for the most part, it's this natural setting sort of park. There aren't any single family homes. There's no one living around there. And then all of a sudden, adjacent, almost surrounded by the park, is this subdivision, you know, for lack of a better word, of homes of this magnitude and scale. And in fact, this may have been one of the smaller ones, and they look like freaking castles. And they look like they've been there forever. It doesn't look like a McMansion that was built last, you know, like in the last 10 years. It looks like something that's been there forever, but is in immaculate condition. And it's completely surrounded by the park.
Yes. So how does this relate to George Washington? Supposedly during the Battle of Germantown, George Washington was stationed near Rittenhouse Township, him and his troops, which is basically one of the main entrances into the Wissahickon Park now, right? That's basically where we met. And he was troubled because they were losing the war. And as a matter of fact, George Washington's forces did lose the Battle of Germantown, and that's what forced them to have to retreat to Valley Forge, okay? So they say one night, and I think it was supposed to be New Year's Eve, 1773. Is that it?
I
If
don't
I remember
know.
correctly,
It sounds good to me.
I think that's what it was recorded as. Washington was troubled and just got on his horse and let his horse wander through the Wissahickon, wherever it might lead him. And simultaneous, there was this monk of the Wissahickon, unnamed. This isn't Johann Kelp or Christopher Witt or any other monks that are known and named, okay? There's this unnamed monk who, even though he was a Rosicrucian, he didn't live with the monks because he was just of a different stature, you know? He lived about a mile from them. And this is, how it's recorded in what's called Tales of the Wissahickon, also known as the Consecration of Washington, okay? And this is very important in Masonic lore, okay? This is, and in Masonic tradition, because of this story, they say the Wissahickon is to Masonry as the Ganges is to the Hindu, is what they say in Masonic lore, as far as how they value the Wissahickon because of this story. Because it was said that simultaneously this unnamed monk sensed Washington was coming and charged two children that were with him. One was a little boy to gather a sword, and the other was a little girl to gather this anointing oil. And George Washington walked right up on them. This is the tradition, right? And supposedly this unnamed Wissahickon Rosicrucian monk, anointed. It's like, yo, you're gonna be the one that leads freedom from the tyrants, in the tyrannical kings, create a land of freedom, da 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 da. Anointed him, took the sword, kind of blessed him, put a laurel wreath, not a crown, but a laurel wreath upon his head. And, this was what was called the Consecration of Washington. And why this is significant is because, of course, the War of Independence was framed around freedom from kingship, right? And so you couldn't have the crowning of the leader of the new country, but still you wanted some quote unquote divine anointment and appointment, right? So thus you have the consecration of George Washington, where this act or this event was supposed to divinely anoint George Washington. And I think why the monastery stables was chosen again is because, just like the Lenape, why they wouldn't name a youth until the equinox to come here, gather here, to tap into the anciency of this land, Washington and this unnamed monk, they were using all the momentum of that as a part of this divine anointment and appointment, you know? So, you know, yeah, this is where this event occurred. And so my feeling is the Rosicrucians through Guy Ballard and the I Am Temple, they really wanted to have something of their own on this land. Now, I was since told that even if you go into the monastery stables, right, like the building that is the monastery stables, that there is more more I Am Temple and presidential art. That it's really all one thing, you know? And so I will say that land was first made the monastery stable by a man named Joseph Gorgas, right? He was a Seventh-day Baptist. So he was a Protestant that viewed Saturday as the Sabbath day, kind of like Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witness of today. So these were like proto Seven-day Adventists, you know, prototype. And no monastical life occurred on monastery stables. He just named the property the monastery, right? But it is recorded in the history of the monastery that some unnamed hermit or monk lived there for 17 months and wrote a book called the Chronicon, okay, which was supposedly a book of all times. And that was one of the things Count Saint Germain was known for in Europe, for telling stories about the Queen of Sheba and Cleopatra as if he was there, you know? So it'd be really interesting to find this Chronicon. But I'm going to just mention one last thing and pass it on to you. That it seemed like right after this guy disappeared in Philadelphia, you have Conrad Beazle appearing in Ephrata. And I know he is credited with writing a book named The Chronicon. And when I read the little bit I read about Conrad Beazle, he was very magnetic and mesmeric toward women, just like this Count Saint Germain. He was full of verve and, you know, like physical verve as well as like, you know, just super well learned, like Comte Saint Germain, very musically inclined, like this Comte Saint Germain, you know. So, you know, oh, but yeah, I might as well. Right. I didn't tell what happened that day. Okay. I will seal off with that.
Mm-hmm.
What else I got? If I got the images I got up here. So yo, something that was real bugged out. Okay. Because this is not a public place. Trust me. Right. And I've studied this place for decades. I came to Philly in 1995, right? And I grew up in Washington, D.C. on the edge of Rock Creek Park, all right? I don't know if you up on that song, Doing It in the Park, Doing It in the Park. All right, yo, I grew up in Rock Creek Park in that generation, okay? I grew up doing it in the park, okay? And that had its own meaning, you know, because the vibe was like, yo, you bring something to the party, you know, a nickel bag of weed. It might have been, you know, that was just in the 70s and 80s. They had the little manila envelopes, $5 bag of weed or a 6-pack, something. You bring something. You fall into the party, man. Rock Creek Park was one big party, and we would do it in the park after dark, you know, into the night. And so I'm just saying that to say Rock Creek Park had a big impact on my childhood, my early adolescence, you know. So when I moved to Philly as, you know, a young parent now in mid 90s, I was looking for something comparable. And that's why I found the Wissa Hicken. And then when I walked up on this thing early. I found it like early, and it just always intrigued me. And I was like, what? Because you see, it's very well manicured, man. It's every day. It's always been well manicured. But I had never seen nobody out there, right, doing no manicuring. I would come Sundays, all different times of the day. Like, is this a church? You know, like who's coming here to worship? Come here. I was like, all right, well, maybe they honor Saturday as the Sabbath. I come Saturdays. Maybe they Sufi. I come Fridays, right? Never would see anyone. I'd come day, I'd come night. And I'm talking decades. I met one character that said he could get me in there. That's a whole nother story. I'm not going to get in. That's another episode. All right. But outside of that, and this is what I'm telling you, man, since 1995, I've never seen no activity, nobody, not even no cars parked around it, right? Because I even got to set the stage. I told the group, I was like, look, because you can't really access this thing from the woods. It's in the woods, but you got to actually leave the park, walk down this street that I described like Wisteria Lane, you know, to get to. So I told them, like, look, this isn't no place you really gonna want to be and talking and standing around, but you got to see it. Get your cameras ready. We're gonna walk, take the shot, get your images, and then we're gonna go back into the woods, to the field where I told you I think those Lenape naming ceremonies would occur, and that's where we're going to resume the discussion, you know? So some of the group was a little wearier than the others. So I told those that were with me, y'all go ahead, because you can't miss it. You know, it's going to stand out what it is y'all are to see and to get your image, right? And I wanted to make sure some that were in the back would see where they had to make a turn. I didn't want to like lose no one, right? So by the time I'm walking up, first off, I knew something was different because there was 3 cars parked in front. I had never seen that before. And we should say that we went on Earth Day, right? This was what, April 22nd. So it was Earth Day. Bam, there's 3 cars out front. I was like, wow. I said this to myself. I was like, man, I never seen that before, right? And as we walking up, we see the gates opening up. And what did he say he was? The
caretaker.
The caretaker. The caretaker came out. And it was interesting. Now, I was recounted this because he spoke with the group a lot more than he spoke with me. Because again, I was waiting for one, right? But he had told him that, right, he was the gatekeeper of the I Am Temple. He gave a brief history, I think, dealing with Guy Ballard. Said that this spot was bought in the 50s from a cartoonist, I think he said, a famous cartoonist. And that he affirmed that Count Saint Germain was the one who anointed George Washington in the account of, the Consecration of Washington, right? But by time Mike and myself walk up, because they were like, they ran down, they was like, yo, Ross Ben, Mike, y'all gotta come hear this boy. He was just saying what y'all was saying, like everything, you gotta come hear him. And they told him, like, yo, you gotta talk to our guide because he just said everything you were affirming, right? When we got up there, he flipped his story. He was like, nah, actually, it wasn't Saint Germain who consecrated Washington. It was a man named Erdenheim. And I meant to research this guy before we came on today. I didn't get a chance to, but he said it was a man named Erdenheim. And so I just thought that was very interesting. I wish I could speak on who Erdenheim is. I can't, right? But yeah, he flipped up his story once he saw myself and Mike. Like, like he wasn't going to be the one that sourced that to us, but I just took it as like I say, man, I've been checking this spot out for over 2 decades and have never seen any activity. Oh, and I meant to say too, the guy told the group, I didn't see y'all out here. I felt y'all. I felt something. I felt y'all. I felt something, and that made me come out here, and then I saw you. That was what he told the group. So I just took it as an amazing synchronicity, man, that affirmed that we're really on to something with this Count Saint Germain dude being the anointer of George Washington, and that, I really feel like if there's any one embodiment of Prometheus, this manipulator of time who's been on the surface of the earth from the golden age. Remember we said historically there's 2 Prometheuses, right? The one that ended the golden age, and then the Ramesses II and Seti I of the 20th dynasty, right? The 19th dynasty. And that these guys did some serious manipulation of time with these technologies, right? And this guy's saying he's been around for 17,000 years. There's any one embodiment of Prometheus, it's Count Saint Germain. And I think, again, because we know with any mystery, particularly the Great Mystery of Philadelphia, once you answer one question, a dozen more pop up. You know what I mean? That's what the whole rabbit hole phenomenon is all about. So I know there's more I gotta penetrate on this, before I can articulate it in a clear fullness. But I think this dude is the master manipulator of time,
All right. Is there anything else?
I think that's enough, bro.
I think that's good. That was I was like, I'm listening to you tell the story. I'm like, is he not going to tell him about the guy who came out? And then like suddenly like, I got it. How can I forget?
Yeah.
It was a unbelievably wild day. And like, we're not even like talking about like what like was happening to the folks afterwards, like internally, but I'm going to go and tell my account of the day, and I think this is going to be a very insightful reflection of like what we were kind of stepping into. Like for me, like before all of the things that have happened on the land is like it's the land. And I'm like, well, what is that? Those are the questions I like to ask. Like, what actually is this thing we're walking on, and like how does that impact experience and so forth? So, without any further ado, I'm going to begin my presentation right here. All right, can you see this?
Yes.
All right, where are we? All right, so this is here. So I want to begin with this. This is kind of how I look at the Wissahickon Park. There are these, circles within circles. It's just a diagram to explain an idea, but in the core of it is this geological history, and not so much like, this is Pangea, or this is the oldest land, and like that in itself is the interest. That fact points to something greater, and that's the mystery. Like I'm not certain what it points to, but it's pointing to something. So then built on top of that is understanding the Lenape history that happened upon it, and all of the whatever had been occurring in what we now think of as Philadelphia prior to the arrival of the most recent arrival of people from Europe. And then on top of that, we then have the Rosicrucian history, like on Wissahickon Park. And then on top of that, and that started like, in the late 1600s. And then it starts getting real interesting with the mainstream U.S. history of the Battle of Germantown. Like that happened in the same spot. And then on top of that is where we get this kind of Masonic story of the consecration of George Washington. Like all of these, like each in themselves, like a really significant sort of thing. They all are grounded on this. So that is kind of the perspective I took away from my time with you. And then also this, embedded in Wissahickon Park is mystery, wonder, death, and double crossing. We didn't go much into those stories, but a lot of your presentations in the past and what you shared with us as we walk the land had to deal with a lot of like the William Penn sort of stuff and death and double crossings. So with that being said, the day begins. I'm super excited to come and do this. Like, up until the day before, I didn't know if it was going to happen. I was like, I don't know about this. I don't know about that. All these loose ends, but then like everything falls in place, and I'm coming out to Wissahickon. It's about 90 minutes away from where I lived. So here's a little bit of insight into Mike's world. So this is one of the ways I start the day. This is a picture from my own private notebook. And each day, like I don't follow the calendar, I have my own. And so I follow and I convert it. I convert it from like the lunar phase. And so these are my weeks. They're not 7 days. They're based upon the quarters. But every morning I pick one card from 3 different decks. I pick a card from the tarot, from the I Ching, and then one from something called the Enchanted Map. And I use them as reflection pieces, contemplation pieces. And, I think about that through the day. It kind of keeps me like something to look at. So we're going to go back. So the week in my system, I say week, with quotation marks, it began on the first quarter, which was the 20th. And, the first of anything kind of sets the tone for like that cycle. And so it was the Hermit was the tarot card I picked. I think I see it as the grandmother, the grandfather, and then this is kind of like the mystical being. And this holds the most weight. So I was like, this is Hermit stuff. So, all right, I know it's going to happen this week. And then this is the actual day, which was the Wissahickon walk. And so I chose these cards before getting in my car and driving down and so forth. So I want to point out the cards which I picked. The cards which I picked was the 5 of Swords, work on what is spoiled, and rescue. And I got your name written down because I want to remember this was the day which I went down to Wissahickon. So for anyone who's not familiar with like the archetypical kind of meaning of these, I'll just take a moment to get into that. So within tarot, which is kind of like a Western history, the Five of Swords is all about like conflict and rivalry and like, you know, violence, crime, rape, murder, assault, like, you know, all sorts of, not just those things, self-sabotaging behavior, but all of this kind of like, you know, really conflict sort of behavior. So then the next card I picked, it was, it deals with the six, each card is a different hexagram of the I Ching. And so the card I picked was number 18, which is traditionally or translated as work on what has been spoiled, often defined as well as repairing the damage. And the last card I picked, which is kind of like the more of like the mystical, I see these as very really well established within the human history, one from the East, one from the West, of these like these languages in which to communicate with the mysteries. These cards kind of set the stage for me. And so when I saw that, Jesse, who came down with me, Jesse's a part of the Susquehanna alchemy family. He suggested to me the night before, he's like, you know what? You should really bring a gift. Bring a gift for Razben. And as soon as I saw this about rivalry and repairing what's been spoiled and all of this sort of stuff, and like, I was like, okay, like, you know, this isn't about me and you. This is about something which is larger. And the gift I already thought I was planning on bringing to you, like I increased that, and I was like, this is a symbolic gesture. These gifts which I give, which included water from the Susquehanna River, which included a piece of wood which had been polished, and then also a stone from the area. Those were gifts, and they were attempting to step into this type of quality of repairing what has been spoiled. So what is this? What has been spoiled? So I just made this quick list of like ways which Philadelphia and the Delaware and what we're going to call Lancaster and the Susquehanna have been linked. You know, I say rivalry with quotation marks. Sometimes it was all out war. Sometimes, you know, it's this kind of like Five of Swords type of archetype. So, you know, we've got the Susquehanna River, the Delaware River, the Susquehannock, the Lenni Lenape, the Susquehanna Mystery, the Great Mystery Philadelphia, Ephrata Cloister, Conrad Beisel, Hermit's Cave, Johann Kelp, Cocalico Creek, Wissahickon Creek, and the River Brethren, and the Church of the Brethren. So now let's go in and look a little bit deeper at what sort of archetypical energies we were stepping into that day. So I'm going to begin with the Church of the Brethren, the River Brethren, Conrad Beisel, and the Ephrata Cloister. So as you took us on the walk in throughout the Wissahickon, one of the places which we stopped was the establishment of the Church of the Brethren. There was a historical marker alongside the creek bend, and says like this is where the church was established in I think it was in 1723 on Christmas Day. So this is before the consecration of George Washington. This is in the same general area. And this is where the Church of the Brethren began. And so the Church of the Brethren is one of the three historic peace churches, which include the Quakers, and the Mennonite churches as well, the Amish traditions, like all of the plain people, which we think of as the Pennsylvania Dutch. They're kind of connected through this establishment of the Brethren Church or other similar type of Brethren churches. So, and all of this goes back to this guy, Alexander Mack, in I don't even know how to pronounce it, some town in Germany. So we've got that right on the Wissahickon. We see right here, this is the historical marker, which is right on the park. It says the Brethren eventually moved to seek religious freedom and reorganized in America. They founded the first American congregation on Christmas Day, the 23rd, in Germantown, Pennsylvania. That's what we're talking about, in a village outside of DC, or outside of Philadelphia. And then we see this right here. In 1728, so this is 5 years later, Conrad Beissel, a Brethren minister at Conestoga, so he was in the church. He was a minister of the Brethren group. So he had already left Wissahickon, and now he's in Lancaster, and he's on the Conestoga. And the Conestoga is significant. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And he renounced his association with the Brethren, and then he opened up the Ephrata Cloister. So, you know, we take that story for whatever it's worth, yeah, but this is kind of the linkage or the lineage, which is at least told on the Wikipedia level of history. That doesn't mean it's not necessarily true. It just means like it's probably not the deepest or the fullest part of the story, but we can, you know, maybe we can ascertain some greater depths to it. But nonetheless, we see this line. So let's go here, just for the folks at home, to give you a visual reference. Right here is the Hermit's Cave. This is Philadelphia, and this is Ephrata Cloister. Conrad Beissel, who we're talking about a little bit earlier, he was here, and then he went over here. This was known as the first Rosicrucian colony in the New World. This was known as the first Rosicrucian permanent colony in the New World. Beissel came here looking for kelp, and they're like, kelp ain't here no more. And so they're like, Conrad Mathai was like, why don't you go west? Why don't you go start something? And so, you know, this is kind of what happened. You know, what do we got here? So a little bit more right here. Yeah, there's about Beissel coming looking for kelp, or Kelpius, as his Latinized name. So back to the Brethren group. So these are all like the different types of Brethren churches, and we see them listed here. We've got the Brethren Church, the Church of the Brethren, the Closed Brethren, the Old German Baptist, Plymouth Brethren, Dunkard Brethren, and we've got this right here, the River Brethren. So the River Brethren, and I didn't know any of this. I didn't know any of this until like I came home from Wissahickon. So the River Brethren are any of the certain Christian groups operating from 1770 during the radical pietist movement during the German colonists in Pennsylvania. Mennonite refugees from Switzerland had settled their homes near the Susquehanna River in the Northeast United States. Their religious guides, Jacob and John Engel, joined with the revival, and their followers were often known by their locality, a group of brethren from north of Marietta, Pennsylvania. So for any folks who've been listening to my stories for a while, that name might sound familiar because I lived in Marietta, Pennsylvania. Marietta is a tiny river town of maybe 2,000 people on the western border of Lancaster and the eastern shore of the Susquehanna. It's got 3,000 people. Just in the same way that Roz lives near the Wissahickon. I'm living near this thing right here, and this is where I was living when the Susquehanna mystery began to unfold. So the initial spiritual leader of the River Brethren was Martin Bohm, and who was excluded from the Mennonite Church, and then he became a bishop of the Church of the United Brethren in Christ. So let's go look at Bohm for a little bit. Clergyman and a pastor. He was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We heard that, but he is believed to be the descendant of Jacob Bohm. And if you're familiar with the deeper lineage of kelp, this is 2 generations back. It was Zimmerman came before kelp, and then they were students of this Jacob Bohm. And so this Martin Bohm is said to be a descendant upon him. His father was also Jacob Bohm, but it's a different Jacob Bohm. And he had one of the first farms in Lancaster County who was deeded his land directly from William Penn himself. And here's an image of some of the old order River Brethren. I'm going to take one moment just to tell this, like a little asterisk. I had the opportunity 2 years ago to work on an Amish hemp farm. It was half Amish, half English. And that is like very, very rare for something like that. I'm not a farmer, but like, you know, the opportunity presented itself. And it was one of the richest, most interesting experiences to be able to work side by side within that community. But nonetheless, I'm going to go back to where we are. So here we go. So we've got that. So now we're going to go and switch gears a little bit and talk about Cocalico Creek, the Ephrata Cloister, and the quest to travel at legendary places. So I'm going to begin right here. This is a slide from a video I made called Mystic Lancaster, and I made this video in, I think, 2017 or 2018. And so this was from Google Maps. This is where the Ephrata Cloister is. And you could see running through the Ephrata Cloister is Cocalico Creek. All right, this is going to be significant in a little bit. So just kind of sit back. So now we got this. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context. So we have right here at the very bottom, this is the Susquehanna River. This is Cocalico. This is the creek, Cocalico Creek. It goes all the way down here. It goes through Ephrata. This is the source of the Cocalico Creek. The Ephrata Cloister is right here. And then it dives into the Conestoga. The Conestoga has a rich influence on the unfolding of the American story. The symbol of the conquering of the West is told through something called the Conestoga wagon. All of the pioneers were said to get these Conestoga wagons, which would allow them to go all the way to California. Like they're sturdy enough for that. The Conestoga wagon, the Cadillac of wagons. They should call it the Conestoga. They should call the Cadillac the Conestoga of cars, I suppose. But nonetheless, this is the area where it came from, and this is also where it said that Beisel owned the Conestoga. It's the name of a river. It's also the name of a location. This is where Beisel first was a pastor within the Church of the Brethren. The very first private rocket, we think of SpaceX as a private rocket company, but the first one was called, I think it's called like the Space Services International, was out of Houston. But their very first rocket, which they did for private space launch, was called the Conestoga. You know, the stogie for like a cigar, that's from Conestoga. Like Conestogas as a concept or as a word, it's within the collective. It's just basically the point I'm trying to make. So anyway, so you go down here, it goes through Lancaster City. This is where I'm living right about now in Millersville. And then it empties into the Susquehanna right here at something called Safe Harbor. This is what's known as Safe Harbor. And this is where we find the Susquehanna petroglyphs. So we have on this, we have starting right here, this is the beginning point, and by stream, by water, you will go all the way down to the petroglyphs. A lot of the research I show is from the very beginning of Jamestown. They're pointing to these petroglyphs. They're pointing, this is right on the 40th parallel. This is like probably like 2 miles downstream from like 40 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. So, all right. So this is why Cocalico is so interesting. So Cocalico is an Algonquin word, and it means place of serpents, or the place where the snakes sleep. And this is the surface, or this is the location in which the source location of the Cocalico Creek. Now, I've not been here. This is a slide put together by Paul Nevin. I saw he gave me permission to use his presentation slides, but he says, when you are on this boulder field, you can hear the water underneath, and it's got this very, very unusual sound, almost like kind of unsettling, because you hear all of the water and the acoustics of what the underground and how it works through these boulder fields. But we're going to come back to this land in a moment. So what's interesting is Cocalico is phonetically very similar to Cocalico, which is a Nahuatl word. totally different language family. And in traditional like understanding of like, you know, different language families, they should have nothing to do with one another. And it has the same meaning. Cocalco is the house of snake. And Cocalco Mountain is very significant within a lot of the Aztec and other Mesoamerican creation myths, because it's said in Cocalco that this is where it all began. This is where it all began. And so, you know, we can see a little bit more here, you know, where that comes from. Cocalco Creek, they say here it's, you know, snake dens, you know, what we're talking about, what you said before, the original people. And then this is a location in the state of Mexico at the House of Snake. This municipality was inhabited by the Toltec people. So, okay, so now I'm going to introduce Tlaquiel. And so Tlaquiel is where a lot of this information comes from. Tlaquiel, who passed, transitioned, whatever word we want to say, in 2012. And he was a Tolteca Chichimeca elder, teacher, heir, and guardian of the oral tradition or true history, author, and spiritual guide. Tlaquiel was recently named, and so this is 2005, grandfather of the grandfathers in the Hall of Deputies in Mexico City by an indigenous council. And so these are like a lot of his ways in which he was recognized. And he traveled the world, and he was a large force. He was a large force, and he was particularly interested in the Susquehanna petroglyphs. And so he traveled the entire world, and he was coming to the petroglyphs. And because from his understanding, the way that this man, this keeper of the oral history, he was like, there were indications of what is at the petroglyphs that tie into his history very, very deeply. And so the petroglyph that he was most interested in, and I'm not going to go too deep, but I'm just pointing out the significance of these markers, of these petroglyphs, is this petroglyph right here, which to Tlaquiel, you know, the man who would probably know more than anyone, he was like, yeah, this is the symbol of Humac, the last king of Tula, you know, the last great city of the Toltec people. And so this here is at the Susquehanna petroglyph. That was very important to him. And the fact that the rivers had the same name, Cocalco. You know, this is the birthplace. And so to him, he was like, all right, this is, you know, this is significant. This is why, like, you know, the man who travels the entire world and he's talking about the canyons in California and like the mounds in Ohio, he's also talking about these petroglyphs in the Susquehanna, which no one has ever friggin' heard about. So, all right, so we go back to our story. So this is all connected on the Cocalco. And so we see that, and what's interesting, I'm going to point this out for you. This is one of the petroglyphs. And if you could look closely, let me see if I can make this bigger. It has in there, it is the carvings of human feet. So when you stand in it, it's like saying, stand right here. You are looking upstream. What are you looking at? This is the Susquehanna. There are 6 known locations of these hundreds of boulders right here that have petroglyphs. You could see this alignment. It's probably like part of something else, which we're only seeing remnants of. But where this foot marker is, if you stand on it, it is right here. It is right there. And in greater context, it's right here. It's looking straight up the Conestoga. It's looking straight up here. Where does the Conestoga go? It goes right here. Same name here. And here we got our cloister folk. We got our cloister folk right here. So, all right. So this is fascinating. I just discovered this while I was putting this slide presentation together the other day, 2 days ago. I started putting this together. I went to go pull up a snapshot, a screenshot of the Ephrata Cloister from Google Maps, because I didn't want to have to go into my archives and find that slide that I showed you from like years ago. So this is Ephrata. And look at the name of the creek. It's no longer named Cocalco. It's now named the Middle Friggin' Creek. Cocalco has disappeared, at least in Google, right? At least Google Maps. So right here, I'm going to go show you like what it what it used to be. So we got this, but this gets even wilder. So this is what it is. So this is Ephrata right here. This was, it says Middle Creek right there, and this was always the Cocalco. And then right here in this confluence, this was Middle Creek, and then Cocalco would meet it. You could see it's the larger of the streams, and then this would continue down into the Conestoga. It was always known as Cocalco, or at least it was known as Cocalco until a couple weeks ago. But now the way it's being presented is this. This is that same, those three streams coming together. This is the skinny one. This is the traditional Middle Creek. This is what was known as Cocalco, and now it's all known as Middle Creek. Like, this makes no friggin' sense whatsoever. But Cocalco is taken off the Google. You know, you read that into whatever it is. They still kind of have it this way at, listed on Wikipedia. I kind of look at them as very similar in terms of how information is disseminated. So, okay, so we're going to go a little bit deeper. So we've got, I realize I skipped a major part of the story, but I'm going to add into it in a moment. So we're going to finish with the Cocalco Creek. We see this, that they changed the name. They changed it to Middle Creek. They changed it to Middle Creek, and we see the Middle Creek. So the question becomes, what is the friggin' Middle Creek? Is there anything significant? And there actually is. There's something very, very significant. If we look right here, this is Ephrata. Right up here is called the Middle Creek Wildlife Management area. And there's this lake right here. It's not a natural lake. It was a dammed lake. This is where the Middle Creek came down from here, and the Cocalco came from here, but they came from the same general area. So, all right. So we talked about here in Cocalco how there is these rocks where they have this hum, they have this sound, which is obviously unusual and uncommon. So what also is happening here is the Middle Creek snow geese migration. Every year between mid-February and mid-March, one of Pennsylvania's most amazing natural phenomena occurs: the Middle Creek snow geese migration. 200,000 snow geese on their annual migration stop at Middle Creek. Now, I try to get some points of reference. I'm like, is this normal? Like, how often, like, are there like 30 spots along the way where 200,000 geese join? I don't know. I can't say that. I couldn't find anything that said that it exists, and I couldn't find anything that says that this is very unique. But my sense is from this sentence right here that this is probably a unique phenomenon. And for whatever reason, which the snow geese do, whatever the snow geese do, and they land wherever the snow geese land, and I don't know how long they've been coming here, they land here. So here's some pictures. We've got like all of the snow geese in this area of Middle Creek, which is where the Cocalco Creek in this land, it all begins. So I'm going to throw this out here just for the folks because this is kind of interesting. I figured if we're going to talk about snow geese, let's just like pull up some of like the Ted Andrews or the spirit animal sort of like analysis of like animal totems. And so we see this right here. What is the snow geese? The call of the quest and travels to legendary places. You know, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the Susquehanna and like the Delaware. We're not talking about Middle Creek and Wissa Hicken. We're talking about this region. We're talking about the totality of it, of the legendary place. I also want to point this out. In the video, which I did separately from you, I talked about Mount Gretna. So this is the point of reference where everything is. This is Mount Gretna. This is Ephrata. This is where that Middle Creek is. These are like maybe 15 miles apart. For the most part, this is relatively not heavily density developed. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go back to that day. Go back to the day of the trip. So I knew that the day I'm dealing with like, you know, this split, this like complementary, this like, I almost imagine like, you know, this battling of brothers, if you will, this like, you know, we've broken off to have the river brethren. We're no longer your brethren. And it's like, you know, the Lenape and the Susquehannock, the all of the different like divisions which we can see. And so I'm thinking about that. And I'm also aware of like, you know, just like the general parasitic vampire nature of kind of the reality which we live in. And when I talked about this a little bit in the Mount Gretna presentation, because we talked about the shootings, I talked about other murders, and I'm going to go to murder again. You know, this is part of the story. There's blood on the land, and we're going to go and we're going to look at this. So I told you, so this is what, so me and Jesse, we're going to go down. Jesse doesn't live in Lancaster. He lives out further west. And we're like, well, where are we going to meet? And so I go and I quickly look at a map. I'm like, you know what makes the most amount of sense? There's a Pennsylvania Turnpike exit in north of Ephrata. Why don't we meet there? Because I know that people park their cars on the side of the road and I could leave my car there. I'm like, all right. And that was my conscious reason of doing that. So in addition to that, all of the stuff we've talked about, there's a very mysterious murder that happened in Lancaster County in 2002. And it's been on my radar for whenever I first heard about it. I moved to Lancaster maybe around 2005, 2007. I don't really remember. And so this murder always screamed of like one, like ritualistic murder, and two, like it also pointed to some like other stuff which Pennsylvania has a really like nasty history with, like, you know, the Second Mile Foundation and so forth. So this is a topic which I know, and me and Jesse have talked about it before. And right when he picks me up, he's like, do you know that this is the Jonathan Luna murder site? Because that's the murder we're talking about, Jonathan Luna. So Jonathan Luna was a district attorney in Baltimore, and he was found dead in a creek in Lancaster County with 36 stab wounds, but the cause of death was drowning in a 2-inch deep creek, and it was officially ruled a suicide. His last name is Luna. So the story of Jonathan the Moon, right? So Jonathan the Moon, he was, my sense is like he probably was bumping up against a story which he wasn't supposed to be bumping up against. That's my take. Because this is a couple years before the whole the Second Mile Foundation story broke, and that's another topic all said and done. But anyway, this is the strange thing about Jonathan Luna, is the fact that the night of his murder, his travel to Lancaster had been tracked through his toll receipt records and all of that sort of stuff at all of the toll booths. And so he went up north on 95, crossed over the Susquehanna, then got on 476, went through Philadelphia, then got on 76 at King of Prussia, came all the way on 76, and then got off at the same exit which me and Jesse were at. And then this creek where his body was found was shortly from it. So this is where me and Jesse were meeting. This is where Luna's body was found. This is that the Pennsylvania Turnpike Reading interchange, and this is the Ephrata Cloister it's about 4 miles away, 5 miles away, to give you like a point of reference of where we're talking about. So that in itself, the fact that we're just meeting at the Luna site, it was like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. You know, this is something we've talked about, but this is also a very logical place where we'd go and meet. But something else happened that day as well. Which has to do with Lancaster strange murders. So within Lancaster, last summer solstice, last June 21st, an Amish girl went missing. And this is very, very, very uncommon and very rare. And she was kidnapped, and it became an enormous story here in Lancaster. And it was picked up on the national news as well. And the reason I say that is like the amount of the energy which it had. Like it had an energy which was able to move outside of the immediate area. So her story had, even though the news cycle had moved on, like the community of Lancaster never let up. Like, you know, I would go everywhere and you'd always see the flyers of her. And it was like it's a tough story, you know, anytime someone is missing, and it's strange. Like when you think of like the Amish community, it's very, very unusual. So the night before I left on the trip. Her body was found, or at least her remains were announced to the public. You know, there has been nonstop searching in this entire time for these remains. And so not only are we at the physical, like in space reality, we're near this kind of like ritualistic murder. We also have this unusual murder. I'm not going to say ritualistic yet, but I am going to indicate that she did disappear on the 21st, on the summer solstice. And the guy who is being charged with the murder, Justo Smoker. You know, his name is filled with Twilight languages as well. You know, so there's I'm just pointing out what we see. So all right, we're going to now go back, and that was kind of the flavor. Like, I'm looking at all of these different things which are going on with within the trip to Wissahickon, looking at the land, looking at the history, but then also looking at what is unfolding in my actual story, because, you know, you can't really take away your own experience from what's happening. So the next part of this presentation is called Nickel Mines, Dirty Deeds, and a History of Violence. So this is where they found her body. So they found the Amish woman's body, Linda Stolfutz, at Dutchland Inc., a water treatment supplier off 41 and Gap. So this is where the body was found, and this is 3.5 miles away from Nickel Mines. So what is Nickel Mines? So Nickel Mines, back in 2006, and this is hard for us to remember because, you know, the collective mind has been so conditioned and abused and traumatized with like with mass shootings and murders and all that sort of stuff that we've almost become numb to them. But back in 2006, there was a big story that in Nickel Mines, that they're in a single room schoolhouse, there was a mass shooting of Amish school children. And we could see here the media from around the nation swarmed the area. In addition to the local media, there were reporters from Montreal, United Kingdom, Russia, Japan, CNN, CNBC. The point I'm trying to make was this was a huge story at the time. This was a real, completely shocked the nation. This is old order Amish. So this is like in the same world as the Church of Brethren. Like, this is that same community which we're talking about. And so we see another Amish murder, and this is very uncommon. This is very unusual around here. And we can see how they show up in physical space. So, and then to give a point of reference, so Nickel Mines is down here. This is where Ephrata is. This is where the Luna body was. These are like 30 miles apart. So these aren't in the exact area. Right here is where the petroglyphs are. So Wharton is in. So I'm going to bring up Wharton for a little bit, because Joseph Wharton, the guy who founded the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, who was the co-founder of Bethlehem Steel, he made his money. He made his real money. Like, he had a first play and he made a little bit of money. And then he made like his big money through the nickel business. And his nickel business came from Nickel Mines. He owned the right to Nickel Mines. That's a literal thing. So in the second winter of the Civil War, Joseph Wharton, Philadelphia scientist and industrialist, sold his interest in the zinc industry and got control of a nickel mine near the Gap. Remember, this is right by Gap, Pennsylvania, near a gap in the southern hills of Lancaster County. This is his nickel mine. Like, this is the history. And so for the next quarter of a century, it comprised almost the entire nickel industry. He went and lobbied the presidency. He's like, hey, we should go and have a 5-cent piece, and we'll call it the nickel. And like, this is the guy who made it happen. And he's like, I'm going to sell you the nickels. How about that? And so, you know, this is what happened. And it all came out of Nickel Mines. Look at this face. Look at the joy on this face. Look at the joy on that face. All right. So this dude Wharton is like, you know, I'm just going to talk about this for a little bit because I thought it was interesting. Like, he entertained distinguished internationally known guests such as Thomas Huxley. This guy was known as Charles Darwin's bulldog, you know, these astronomers, Andrew Carnegie. He was a scientist. He was a businessman. He presented and was a member of the Philosophical Society. He was, and also, so his grandmother, Hannah Rodman. I don't know if that's of the same Rodman of which we know Hillary Rodman Clinton. It very well could be, but I couldn't confirm that. But he comes from this lineage of Thomas Cornell. And so these are all of the people who are said to come from this Thomas Cornell. Everyone from like I believe it was his grandson, or Ezra, who was the founder of Cornell University, a signer of Declaration of Independence, but then also Bill Gates, Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, Bobby Graham, John Kerry, Amelia Earhart, Josh Rosen, Lizzie friggin' Borden had her axe. Like all of these people come from this guy. Like, you know, this is one of those lineages which we've never heard of, but like plays a big part in the background. So all of that is connected in this area, in the mineral world in between these two rivers. So Bethlehem Steel, which he was the founder of, they eventually bought out Lackawanna Steel. And Lackawanna Steel was a steel company out of Scranton. And this is just kind of a small thing, but I want to go and bring this into the conversation. These steel companies were immensely competitive. They did not like each other. U.S. Steel, Bethlehem Steel, Lackawanna Steel. And when Lackawanna Steel fell on hard times and their biggest competitor had to buy them out, that wasn't well received. I mean, these are dominating mindset individuals. So when you're bought out, like you're not happy about it. And if you're unaware of this, you know, folks at home, like Scranton is, you know what? Watch that movie, The Irishman. It's all about the Scranton crime family. It's the biggest crime family. La Cosa Nostra is about you don't know anything. So if you think you know something, you're not. That's what you're supposed to know. Like the crime families that are behind the scenes are the big ones. This is all out of Scranton, and they ran. You know, it just makes sense that you know their biggest industry is going to be tied with it. So there's a hit mentality tied into all of this as well. So I'm building up to something. So what do we have here? This is where it starts getting really friggin' weird, my folks. All right. So Joseph Biden claims to have heard gunshots from the Lancaster Amish school shooting. Joseph Biden is on record saying, he was vice president at the time. This story came out in 2013. He said, and it was at a presentation to the Council of Mayors when he was vice president. He was like, yeah, I was in earshot of the Amish school shooting. And so that is written off by the media. It's like, oh, that's just Joe using exaggeration to make a point. I think that the guy was in earshot of the Lancaster shooting. Joe Biden's a Scranton boy. Yeah, he's from Delaware, but he was moved to Delaware to work for the DuPonts because he's a Scranton boy. So this is the other thing which is interesting. So our Linda Stolfutz, she disappeared June 21st, 2020. Joe Biden makes a public appearance in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, June 25th, 2020. It's all the same people. It's the same, like, you know, we're seeing the same sort of thing. So I'm going to go even a little bit deeper with this. So part of the collective history, of what we are told about, or part of the collective history which has shaped the modern mind, deals with school shootings. And we think about it in a much more modern context. And maybe the first real kind of shooting that took place on a school that really got into the collective mind, and what I think was a major part of the ritual. That's probably like back at University of Texas. I think that was in the 50s, but that's not where it began. The first school shooting is listed April 26, 1764 in Greencastle, Pennsylvania. Okay. And they just scrubbed this from the internet too. This used to be on Wikipedia. I saw this like a couple months ago. You can't find it anymore, but I found this reference to it. So this is the story This is the story that's put out that happened at this Green Castle School massacre. This took place in a one-room schoolhouse, just like the Amish one-room schoolhouse. And it happened on July 26, 1774. And so the Wikipedia story tells us that 4 Lenape Native Americans entered a settler's log schoolhouse in the province of Pennsylvania and killed the schoolmaster Enoch Brown and 10 students and wounded another one. And so, and it's memorialized right here with this obelisk. So this is the story which is told. So now we've introduced at least into this the collective storytelling, because a lot of these stories, like, you know, they're not exactly accurate, but we don't know what has happened. This is what's being presented as accurate. We've now had a connection with the Lenape people, and they're saying that this is where it began. This is where they're saying the story began. So now let's go look at this. So right here is a little bit of a map. This is Nickel Mines. This right here is Greencastle. Single schoolhouse killing, you know, and this is by a guy whose initials are CC. His name was Carl Charles Roberts, you know, another 3 named killer who like has all sorts of strange sort of things around him. And on the day of his shooting, like, you know, woke up and was different than any other day. But anyway, so let's go look at this. We're going to follow this line. What does this line connect? So first, let's see where this line crosses the Susquehanna. You could see, if you look closely right here, see if I could zoom it in. We could see it's where this bow is, and you could see that island. It's where it says Pequot Valley. Where is that? Where is that? That's at Safe Harbor. This is where the petroglyphs are. Let's look at these lines again. Oh, the line goes right over the petroglyphs. That's friggin' weird. So now let's go look at this. Oh, look, it goes right through friggin' Gettysburg. That's friggin' weird. And there's a third story in the collective mind about violence tied in with the Amish community. And this story goes back to 1920s, I'd say. Let me see what size I have this in. It's called Ray Myers Hollow, or the Hex Hollow, and it's located in central Pennsylvania near Maryland border. And the area was brought to national attention by a murder that occurred in 1928. Another one of these national attention murders. The name Hollow was later changed to Spring Valley County Park. So I just want to show you right here. This is Spring Valley County Park. This dot right here is where the line went across. So it's like 5 miles away. That's why this line is like this circle is slightly below. So what is this? What is this Reimers Hollow? Well, it was in 1928 under the malicious advice of a local woman named Nellie Knoll, who was the River Witch of Marietta. This is the same Marietta which we talked about before. Like, these small things keep coming back, that she told this guy John Blymer that this other guy Reimer was using one of the secret books of the Amish and the Amish magic, which is known as Brokerai, a spell book, which was known as a long lost friend. And she's like, yeah, he's cursing you. You're going to have to go get that book. And if you can't get that book, you're going to have to kill him. So that was kind of the story behind it. The Brokerai or Brokerai is also known as powwow. And it is you could just tell by the name. It is, this is what it says. Is a vernacular of North American traditional medicine and folk magic originating in the culture of the Pennsylvania Dutch. These are the Church of the Brethren. Blending aspects of folk religion with healing charms, powwowing includes a wide range of healing rituals used primarily for treating ailments in humans and livestock. Although the word powwow is Native American, these ritual traditions are of European origin and were brought to colonial Pennsylvania in the transatlantic migrations of the German-speaking people of Central Europe. We could see this talks a little bit more about this. Books also used within the powwow, and just the fact that it's called powwow. No, this was a blending of practices. You just know that by the peoples lived together. These were peaceful people. They were mystical, magical people, but they lived peacefully with other peaceful. They were the 3 churches of the peace. The other books of interest to them were the Egyptian secrets of Albertus Magnus, and then also the 6th and 7th books of Moses. There was a rift in these communities, but there's something going on. So I'm going to bring this presentation to. I'm going to bring it all home right now because I went all over the place. But there are all these interesting sort of connections which we're working with. So we talked about how, not only was this like a history lesson of what we went through, it was also like experiential, like weird things started happening. Like, you and I were talking about this off camera, like a lot of portals been open, a lot of weird things, like a lot of energies have been coming up in my life and in your life and in Jesse's life. And I'd like to talk to the other people who've been on the tour. I'd like to hear what's going on with them. So this is what happened the very next day. So my lady, Jenny Rivers, she had planned a month ago to go on this kind of like ladies retreat up in the mountains of Reading. And this was planned way before the trip to Wissahickon, but it took place on the day or the Friday following the trip to the Wissahickon. So this is a screenshot of the message which she sent me. She's like, "Who is Conrad Weiser? I'm at his camp, apparently." So this is where she is. And so who's Conrad Weiser? Conrad Weiser is a key part of the community of the Ephrata Cloister. And so where is all of that? Like, this has been planned months ago, and I ended up going the next night. They had it opened up like a drum circle, and it was like a wild experience. It opened something up inside me. This is where that Conrad Weiser park is. This is where Conrad Weiser, or camp, is, not park. It was a camp. This is where he is said to have lived. Ephrata is all the way down here. And then this is one of the pictures of some of the ruins which are found on the location. So there's a lot of stuff, my friend, but there was a lot to unpack with everything which we're tapping into. And so it's with that, I'm going to close my portion of it and open up to any sort of discussion or questions or anything like that if you'd like to go down that path. Oh, you're on mute.
I was just saying it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, a lot to unpack, but man, I did have a question. It's not directly related to the things you were talking about, but it was just something I've heard about Ephrata, that there is a place called the Green Dragon Market there or something. What's your awareness of the Green Dragon?
So in the USA Today, just last week, they listed the Green Dragon as one of the, one of America's best open markets. The Green Dragon is an experience. Like, just talking like go into it. Like, it's enormous, and it's just, you got to go to it. It's a farmer's market. It's like it's like a junk market. It's an antique market. Anything that could be sold is sold there. The significance of Green Market by name, obviously, that has not been lost upon me. The Green Dragon Market, excuse me, because in the story that we're told of the founding fathers, that where they met in Boston, as they were beginning to plan their Boston Tea Party, as they're beginning to plan the Revolutionary War, which we talk so much about today, their meeting place was called the Green Dragon Tavern.
That's why I asked. I was wondering, like, what's the link with that,
I mean, there's certain, for me, like, I just hold it in the space, like, I know it's linked. I haven't spent enough time going there. I'm not really certain. I don't like going. Mike personally doesn't feel comfortable up around those areas. And so I don't spend a lot of time there. I like Marietta. I like that part of Lancaster, southern Lancaster near the petroglyphs. I love how that feels. That area just is not appealing to me. So I
the geomancy on lock there. Ain't no natural vibes flowing. So when you get there, Your frequency's jammed up.
Got that right.
Yeah.
You got that right. So I don't go there. So I'm just like, all right, there's a green dragon. I'm gonna not go to the green dragon.
And Ephrata, like this is right. Is this in the heart of the cloister? So there's like that feeling you're saying extend to the what they call the cloister itself.
So the cloister is like I think it's closed right now, but it's a historical place. Let's say it's like 3 acres, 2 acres. There's like a main road, Route 322, that goes right through Ephrata. And Ephrata's kind of like, it's a charming town. And it's like, it's kind of high up in the hills in Lancaster. It's got like nice views. And like, if you were to go to Ephrata Cloister, you would like walk through the door, you'd park your car and you would see like all of the buildings that are still in place. And so it's like a tourist destination. The Green Dragon is probably like 3 or 4 miles outside of like the main Ephrata, like downtown area. And it's considered Ephrata in terms of like postal, but not necessarily, you're not going to walk from one to the other.
And could you pull up your map and show where these things in relation to High Point? You didn't.
All right. Let me try. Let me start with this one. If I can find that. So, no. All right. I'm going to go with this. This is Ephrata right here. I'm going to make this bigger. So this is Ephrata right here. Lidditz is a really interesting town too. Lidditz was a closed village for like 100 years. Like Lidditz is, and I could talk about Lidditz for a long time. So this is Ephrata. This is Lancaster City right here. This is probably like a 15, 20-minute car ride, if even that far, going down 222. And then you got to go out west. This is the same Route 30. You know, your Route 30, this is the same Route 30. This is Lincoln Highway. And so High Point is located right here. High Point is right here. Marietta is right here, right where this 90-degree turn is. That's Marietta. This is where Chickies Rock is. A very, very significant geological formation. Marietta is right here. The history of Marietta is very, very interesting as well as it relates to the rolling out of the American history. Right here, this is where this is why the Battle of Gettysburg happened. The South had come up through Maryland, and they were coming to cross the Gettysburg, cross the Susquehanna, and they were going to go straight into Philadelphia. That was the plan, and the South was dominating the war at that time. And the folks here, they burnt down what was at the time the longest covered bridge on the planet. And so the troops were like, well, I guess we can't cross the river. So they turned back around. And this happened right here, right where High Point is, like literally where High Point is. And they went back and they restaged at Gettysburg. And then the Battle of Gettysburg occurred because of that. This is probably maybe about a 35, 40-minute car ride. And then right here is where the petroglyphs are.
Okay.
So I'm going to be planning my version of your tour, and we're going to get everyone to come out for that. And I'm not certain where we'll go first. But I want to replicate a similar thing in terms of what you did. And I think that. And I also see, like in the summer, like I would love to see if we could do that, like, you know, as you do more of these tours, because you indicated that there's the upper Wissahickon, which we didn't even get to, which we want to go and see all of those spots. And so I think it would be a very interesting sort of thing to be able to have these different sort of tours to look and, like, you know, to spoil or to heal what has been spoiled, to repair what has been broken between whatever these rivers, these peoples, these experiences, what that represents. And I see that being done, like in like, you know, in fellowship, like, you know, people coming together who enjoy the company, and we're like sharing stories, and we're having fun, and we're sharing food, and we're learning, and we're growing, and we're all this sort of stuff, and walking in a closer version to the natural world than what maybe we are experiencing right now.
Right. And I would say it seems like people that are magnetized to this information, they're high frequency people. Because that group, man, it just, the collective of us, we were moving with a force, you know. Like I said, that dude said he felt us before he saw us. You know, we was moving with a high frequency, you know. Yeah.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
So, all right, I think this was a good episode. There was a lot which we covered, so I would recommend to all the folks, like, you know, you probably need to watch this. So if you're watching this right now, you watch the whole thing. But if you want to get deep, you got to go a couple views of it and see it in bits and pieces. Are there any final words which you need to share?
Nah, I'm good, man. Thanks. I'm looking forward to be totally honest, since we're getting into the warm season, next new moon, I might be out on your side, man. Let's do a live, like, you know, hit up some spots, man, and record.
Man, would I love that.
Yeah.
If we can make that happen, if you can come out, I will go put together something which is going to be, you know, it'll knock your socks off.
All right, well, yo, consider it done, man.
All right.
Yeah.
You folks heard this. You heard it here first.
All right. All right. So, yo, from one mystic to another, bruh. Salute.
From the 40th. Until next time, my friends, we'll see ya. This is Mike and Razben.